gamers. Today we're going to make an update to the two guides of HRE and Chinese. The same thing I've done with vsabbasid and Delhi. There's not many changes. There's not a new build with HRE and Chinese, so I figured why not just update the existing ones so you guys know exactly where you're at and what you're supposed to do. We're gonna start with HRE. I'm gonna play the Season 1 video in the background. If you want to play HRE or China, this is the Season 2 guide, but I would suggest watching the Season 1 guides first, where I covered a lot of the basic stuff of HRE and China and how you're supposed to play and what you're supposed to do, yada yada. And as you can see in this video, I also show like different spots for Aken Chapel, where you should place it, how you decide where to place Aken Chapel, and so on and so forth. And once I give you guys an update on HRE, we're gonna go through all the matchups of HRE, what to focus on, and then we're gonna go through China, the changes that they had in patch. China has changed a little bit in the build, and I'm gonna discuss that. And then also we're gonna cover the Chinese matchups, as I'm watching a video of myself teaching you guys while teaching you right now. So, number one thing that has changed for HRE in the recent patch is Chapel is now a drop-off point. So it counts as a mining camp, a mill, or a lumber camp. So you can basically drop off the resources there. This changes things a little bit. You can see in this game, for example, I decided to put Chapel next to berries. So technically you don't need mill to gather the berries. Or if this was like a wood line right here, you could drop off Chapel right next to the wood line. So that you don't need to build a lumber camp, right? So there's some little optimizations, and it's kind of nice. Obviously it's not really usable on gold because you want to have a mining camp in order to get to feudal, but it's very useful for specifically for wood lines, maybe even building it close to stone, so that you can have a quick drop-off point. In some situations it could save you 50 wood. That's pretty much what it is. And some maps that have like deer right here, if you make a chapel like this, for example, let's assume we're on like an Altai or a hill and dale where deer are nearby. If the deer are on this area, if you make a chapel, you have it next to berries, you have it covering gold, covering sheep, and then you can push in the deer a bit closer. So there's some optimization to be made there. It's a decent buff, nothing enormous. So you shouldn't really like put Chapel all the way out there on the deer. Like if you look at the mini-map of this game, you don't want to go all the way where deer are and drop a Chapel there. You still want to keep it a 2 or at least 2 or maximum 4 tiles away from your TC so that your TC covers your Chapel. Next thing that has changed is a lot of stuff in Castle, actually, a lot of stuff with prelates that I'm going to talk about in a second. But before that, another thing that I wanted to mention in this guide, I talked about rushing castle like naked, AK with no units. People have gotten better at punishing, at rotating their units around your towers and stuff like that. And towers did get a -1 range nerf and an HP nerf. Now, you can still go naked castle with like 1 or 2 towers defensively and no units. The problem is players realize that you can actually just mass feudal units. So if you're playing like, Horseman Spear, you can actually just mass units or Horseman Archer against HRE. And even though they get to castle, you can just sit around their base. And because you'll have like 30 units and HRE is going to have 5, they won't be able to push out and get relics. If you see your opponent being aggressive, no matter what the matchup is, I would advise you to put like 6 workers on wood. So from this point, instead of having 8 on food, have like 5 on food, 6 on wood, and just leave 3 on gold. Don't add more. So you can slowly add farms so you don't run out of food, or you can add production buildings and make some units as well. Because like I said, before, what ended up happening in the Season 1, you would rush castle and then people would just try to rush castle with you and then have no units on the map or have very few, and you can kind of just yoink relics, get some knights and stuff like that. But now, if you get castle and then you make knights, there's usually like 20 spears waiting for you. So you kind of have to either make units while slowly getting to castle, while using the same build, or just have, if your gold is secure, get some wood and get some farms going so that you don't run out of food, because you can't really go onto the map if the opponent has too many units near your base. So that's the one thing I would say. You can still go naked castle like I said, but depending on what the opponent is doing, you might need to make production buildings before you're going to castle. Get some horsemen out, maybe try to raid to get your opponent out of position so that you can start picking up relics. So if you see a lot of spearmen in castle, or as you're going castle, then I would advise you to go men-at-arms. Or if you're going knights, just go raid, like don't try to fight spearmen with knights. If you see a lot of like horseman archer stuff, you can go pure knight, or you can go into men-at-arms. And another thing that has changed, you can go imperial straight away after, right? Depending on what the game is. It's a lot riskier these days. But there's another strategy that has come up that I'm going to be talking about now. But first I'm going to mention some of the changes that allowed this strategy to happen. So, Cathedral now acts as a monastery as well in Season 2. Obviously, these patch notes came like a month ago, maybe even more, but if you're learning HRE, maybe you didn't know. So, Regnitz Cathedral, which is the H3 landmark, is now counts as monastery. So, not only you can place relics inside of it, you can also train prelates in it. So, as you're aging up to castle, in this guide, I tell you guys to build prelates as you're aging up, because you want to be picking up, you know, the relics and have prelates. But now, the only time you should be getting prelates out of your TC is if you know you can get the relics. Like, if there's no units, pre-make the prelates and go get the relics. But if your opponent is all the way around your base, or maybe there's towers, there's no point to pre-make the prelates if you can't get the relics anyway. So you might as well just make them out of Cathedral once the Cathedral is done. So that way you don't lose the villager production time on your town center. That's number one. And also because it's a monastery, it also has all the monastery upgrades, the Cathedral. One of the things that kind of allowed for HRE to have a new strategy is Inspired Warriors is a upgrade in Cathedral that buffs your... basically, prelates had a bug where they couldn't inspire units or something. They didn't do it properly, I can't remember. But now prelates can heal and buff villagers or units at the same time. So, since that fix happened, Inspired Warriors tech gives your units 15% damage and 1 armor, I think. 1 range and 1 melee armor when a prelate buffs it. Similar to how prelate buffs villagers, inspires them, it can now inspire units. So there is now a playstyle with HRE where if you start getting relics with Cathedral and you have insane gold income, you can go for Landsknecht, or as I like to call them, Landschits, and Knights with prelates, get Inspired Warriors and Herbal Medicine, and basically your army is just heavily reliant on gold. And you can basically out-heal a lot of your opponent's damage while buffing your units to deal even more damage. So if you want to play, I always said that you want to escape Feudal and Castle with HRE. But now with HRE, you can go Men-at-Arms, Knights, Lane Shits, plus Prelates with Inspired Warriors and Herbal Medicine tech. It will just give you such a strong army where you can fight in Castle and try to even kill your opponent. But you can also go Imperial. It's up to you. It's completely up to you. One thing to note is now relics give 200 gold per relic, no matter where you put them. So in Season 1, the relics only gave you they gave you 300 gold a minute, only if you put them in Cathedral. Now relics give you 200 gold, but you can put them in a tower, you can put them in a keep, you can put them in a dock, or you can put them in Cathedral. So I think it was a very nice change because now it allows you to put your relics in towers and buff towers because they gain like vision and HP and damage and so on and so forth. So that's another thing to consider. So if you get all 5 relics as HRE, you get 1,000 gold a minute, which is pretty insane. Look at that dog chilling. She's like, when are you gonna give me attention? So yeah, other than that, HRE has pretty much remained the same. The build has remained the same. It's just like the only change from Season 1 to Season 2 in Feudal is how many workers to commit to wood. Like I said, if you're getting pushed or if you want to make units or farms, put at least 6, 7, 8 workers on wood. and then 3 on gold and the rest on food. So you can basically slowly get gold and get food for unit production or aging up. And once you hit castle, you have 2 choices. You either harass a little bit with knights, like I mentioned in the season 1 guide, and then you go imperial, and then you just pump with palace of printer, print the workers. Or you can stay in castle now with this in season 2 and kind of fight with your prelates, which is, you know, kind of interesting, because before healing units were not really used in fights except Delhi, but now HRE can do it as well. Other than that, the meta for HRE's unit comp is usually HRE players are very allergic to ranged units, so most of the time you'll see HRE players just go mass spearman horsemen or mass men-at-arm knights, mass men-at-arm spearmen, horsemen knights, something like that, and just kind of try to overwhelm your opponent, because you do have so much gold, and with Akin Chapel you can have insane food income. Now let's jump into the game and quickly give you guys a rundown of all the matchups. By the way, before anyone asks, this is my account. I just changed the name to Core, just letting you guys know. So HRE versus English. This matchup is pretty good for HRE, because English has a very hard time stopping you get to castle. So this is one of the matchups you can go naked castle if you place your towers well enough to protect against longbows. One thing to know, towers, like I said, have -1 range from what they used to have, so English longbowmen will be more annoying for you, okay? But if you manage to get to castle, you can basically, if they have mass longbows and no spears, you just go knights and mow them down. If they have a lot of spears and a lot of longbows, you want to open up with just a bunch of men-at-arms and try to push away your opponent. You can go Burger Palace in all these matchups if you either think you can kill your opponent, or if they're like super pushing with like rams and stuff and you need defense immediately. But if you're not in danger, there's no rams, still go Regnets, get some barracks, and then get men-at-arms to defend yourself. Late game is very, very good for English because of their gold income, but you also have a lot of gold income assuming you get the relics. So technically English will have a slight advantage, but you should enter castle and imperial with way higher economy than them, and that's something you should try use and abuse in order to win that matchup. If it reaches like the ultimate late game where the map is split, I mean they do have 50% attack speed on their units if they're fighting their castles, so that's going to be pretty rough for you. But in no means I would say it's pretty favored in feudal for HRE, probably pretty favored in castle, and then early to mid imperial HRE is pretty good, and then late it's very good for English. Now the one thing to be careful of is you can lose villagers very easily against English, so sometimes you might even need to build 2 or 3 towers to make sure you cover everything. But you don't want to delay your... you either basically have to fight them in feudal, or you have to get to castle as fast as possible, because the longer you're in feudal fighting against English and you're not teching up, the harder time you will have, because eventually they're going to have enough longbows where they can just kind of kite you and stuff. A villager rush. If you're playing against villager rush, probably like villager rush, for those that don't know, is where you pull 5 villagers and you attack the enemy gold as English straight away, so they can't tech up. I would suggest probably just get a barracks and make like 5, 6, 7, 8 spearmen and just push away the workers. That will delay your feudal, but you have to consider that will also delay their feudal. Now, if you're meeting the barracks men-at-arm rush, try to be on your toes against English and maybe scout pretty. Kind of go beeline towards their base if that's something you're worried about, the cheese. And if you're meeting the early barracks men-at-arm rush, you can just send a lot more workers on start on gold to get the 200 gold so you can age up, and then once you hit feudal you can build an archer range, kill the men-at-arms, and then continue your build as planned. Mongols. This is another matchup where you should have easy time getting to castle, and this is another matchup where getting to castle is a lot easier for you than them. And this is why Mongol will most likely try to tower rush you. So if they do tower rush you, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can open with barracks and fight them, and this is another matchup where it's not a bad idea to beeline towards their base And if you see a barracks, just pull like 5, 6, 7 workers on wood, get the prelate there, inspire and make barracks, and then fight. Because the one advantage you have over Mongols is that not only you're getting resources faster, but you also have a prelate that can heal. On the other hand, what you can do is kind of like the same thing against English. You could get 200 gold for age up, abandon your gold, let them tower the gold, and then go feudal, get archers, deny further tower rushing, and then just get gold somewhere else, or you can pull your villagers to kill the one tower. That is up to you. You can try both ways to defend that, see what works for you, and then go with that. Later in the game, I mean, it's pretty... Mongol late game is not that great because they have no walls, so you can just do massive run-bys. In Castle, you should probably be the most worried about massive siege pushes. So that's one thing to worry about. Luckily, that siege push with Mongols is not that great against HRE because you can put a keep and then you can use the repair ability and kind of delay that push for quite a long time. But yeah, Mongol is not known to like overwhelm you with units. It will either tech up to castle or it will tower rush. If they tech up to castle, then you should be able to get there faster. If they tower rush you, well, you know what to do. French. French is the counter civ. French and Rus are counted as counter civs to HRE. Not really, you can still win, but they are good against HRE. And the reason they're good is they can go extremely long in feudal. And they can basically kill you even if you are in castle and you have castle units. They can still fight you and they can overwhelm you from feudal to castle age. And that's one advantage that French and Rus have over the other civs against HRE and why they're good against HRE. So one thing you have to worry about is I would 100% advise you to build tower on your food sources that are around your TC and the tower on your gold, because it will help a lot with zoning the French knights. And once you do that, if you see archers coming as well, after they've seen your tower, they will most likely go for a ram push. So what you can do then is just get a couple of spearmen, maybe a couple of men-at-arms, and just defend your gold or whatever the tower is, because the tower can kill the archers very quickly, and then you'll have spearmen to deal with the knights and do like a slower tech up, like I mentioned earlier, to castle, because there's no need to necessarily rush castle. If you can do it, I mean, sure, go for it. And versus French, if you do reach castle and the opponent still hasn't killed you or done damage to you, you can just go pure knight because you'll have better knights than they do. And if they're going archers, obviously with knights you're going to be able to kill them. Late game is definitely better for HRE, and then castle, depending how you both got there, is either favored for HRE or favored for French. But just because you get castle versus French doesn't mean that the game is over like against some civs, because like I said, even if you go knights, they can also just go knights and beat you if they have higher knight count. So that's something you need to be careful of, but you're probably gonna get either ram all-in or just constantly harassed with knights. So a unit comp like spearman knight is really good against French, so that's something that I would definitely suggest. Rus late game is technically better than HRE, but the advantage that you have is same like against English. You should be entering Imperial with better economy, and you should be entering Castle with better economy. So you kind of have to build on that lead when you're playing HRE versus Rus. If you're both even in the Imperial, you're probably going to lose because of Streltsy. But with Palace of Swabia, and if you manage to get all the relics, you should have higher economy. So it's kind of like quality versus quantity in that case. So you kind of try to overwhelm your opponent. HRE is played a lot like China and Abbasid these days, where you just overwhelm your opponent with crap ton of units, rather than like making, hand cannoneers or heavy tech units. In Feudal is played the same way like French is. So everything I said for French goes for Rus. They're very similar as far as that goes. So yeah. The one thing that is different than from French to Rus is they also have the chance to rush castle, but your castle should be faster. HRE has the fastest castle timing in the game, And another thing worth mentioning is, if you both get to castle around the same time, you need to get your relics while denying their relics. And as long as you pick up 2 relics and they pick up 3, that's fine for you. That's 400 gold a minute for you, and that's 300 gold a minute for them. So if you take 2 or more relics, you're going to be ahead. HRE Mirror. HRE Mirror is basically whoever can rush to castle first. And as you're rushing castle, you want to build a stable or a barracks, depending what you prefer. And you want to harass your opponent's prelates as they're trying to get relics, while you're trying to secure your relics. And the player that has the advantage is the player that gets the 3 relics. So each one of you should get 2, and it's usually going to be the fight around the 5th relic, who's going to get that. If the opponent gets it, they're going to have 600 gold per minute, you're going to have 400 gold per minute. That doesn't mean the game is over, that doesn't mean you're so far behind you can't recover, but that's how the matchup usually runs. And the unit comp for this matchup is usually something like knights early on, then a little bit later like knight horsemen and lance shits, because both HRE will be massing melee units, so lance shits are going to do really well. Mix in some man-at-arms, some spearmen, basically make all the melee units in the world, and be careful of the splash damage. Usually this matchup is very focused in castle, because the moment you stop making units, the other player can just kind of overwhelm you. But if you get the Imperial, same thing there. It's just mass melee units fighting each other and trying to get map control with the keeps and the auto repair. One thing to note, with HRE in any matchup, make sure you have your prelates, whenever you build a forward keep or something, make sure to try to get a prelate, take the relic and put it in that forward keep, because it buffs it so much. It's 100% worth it. Obviously try not to lose the relic, but if this is something you can learn and manage to do and remember, it's going to pay off quite a bit, because it increases the range of the castle as well. So if you have the bombard emplacement on it, it's just going to do so much damage and have insane range. HRE versus Delhi. This is one of the matchups that is considered HRE favored, because by the time Delhi gets their stuff going, you're already in castle. So Delhi basically starts with, they have sacred sites, they just cap them, and then you're in castle, and you either have a burger palace or cathedral, and you're like picking up relics and going man-at-arms. So Delhi will most likely just have mass amount of units, and this is something that I was talking about earlier. Don't push out with 2 men-at-arms if they have a lot of units on the map. Just get like 5, 6, 7 men-at-arms, upgrade them, and then slowly push out the Delhi, recapture their sacred sites, and then start getting the relics. And the moment they get their castle, they're going to already have scholars in position to take the relics, so try to be quick on that one. Delhi is not really played in Imperial, so you're going to have advantage in Imperial. They might do like huge pushes in castle, where they do like keep drops, which is something you might have seen in pro games, and they try to eliminate you straight away. But just like against Mongols, when Mongols do the siege pushes, those pushes are not that good against HRE, because of the emergency repair ability, and you can just put a keep of your own in order to kind of deflect that. The longer the game goes, is going to be better for you. But make sure to deny sacred sites. Chinese. HRE versus China. This matchup is considered favored for HRE, but that doesn't mean that you will beat China no matter what. The reason for that is China main kind of gameplay is 2TC Song Dynasty, and basically by the time that kicks in, you're gonna be already in castle and picking up relics. So then the real game starts when you have the relics, they got the 2TCs, and what you want to do is either try to kill them, which is very hard to kill China in castle because of Nest of Bees, or you want to rush in Imperial, so you have Palace of Swabia plus relics, and then you want to try to constantly push the Chinese player so that they can't go to castle, or to Imperial, sorry. And that way, that's where your advantage lies. Like, you want to force fights when you're Imperial against their castle, and if they never tech up, you're going to have the tech advantage.
Are you a big fan of Malians or Ottomans so far?
And you're going to have a lot more income to work with, because, you know, assuming you get 5 relics, that is a crap ton of gold. So, yeah. Super late game, China should obviously win. They got the good hand cannoneers. They got better siege. And they got fire lancers, which are pretty scary. Abbasid versus HRE. This is an interesting matchup, and I feel like it's kind of like a 50-50. Abbasid will go for second or third TC even, and then they're gonna delay their feudal, or delay their castle, sorry, because they can't really rush castle to compete with you. So what you can expect from Abbasid is just a crap ton of units, usually horsemen and camel archers, and they will try to deny your relics with those units. So it's kind of like French and Rus, except they don't have knights. They just got horsemen and camel archers. Which, if they mass enough of camel archers, they're gonna just kite your units. So it's very important that you have something to kill camel archers, either your own archers or go for knights or something like that, so you can actually fend them off. Because if you just go men-at-arms, they're gonna kite you forever. Even though men-at-arms are pretty tanky against them. So again, it's quality versus quantity matchup all over again. Late game, I would say it's pretty even. Like, you're gonna have way more gold income. Their infantry is gonna have more HP, but then you have land shit, so you can mow them down. You both have culverins, so I would say it's pretty even, maybe even slightly favored to HRE in the super late game. In castle, assuming you both go there, you will probably be meeting siege, so similar to Mongols. This is a typically good matchup for HRE, but you can get easily overwhelmed with just, like I said, sheer amount of units that Abbasid can produce. I think that covers HRE. Let's do China now and go through the stuff that China has. What has changed for China? China has not more changes, but more impactful changes, I guess. HRE also had a lot of changes, but they're very, like, kind of, you know, minor, I would say. They're not gigantic. But China has a lot more changes that impact the game quite a bit more. Number one thing that has changed, you guys, when I made the other guides, with some of the other civs, what pro players started doing is you chop your first wood, like with these workers, you chop your first wood, and when they all got 10 wood, you can build a mill, and then the workers will drop off wood at the mill and then go for the berries. So this is one thing that people have started doing with a lot of civs, and what this allows you is to not have that long distance mining with any of the civs to get that first 50 wood for your lumber camp after you've built all your stuff. So that's one thing you can do to improve. So again, when the game starts, you put 6 workers on the tree. Once you have 10, you just build a lumber mill. Don't shift queue, don't do anything, just build a lumber mill, and once they finish, they will drop off the wood there. The biggest change for, I'm gonna speed this up a bit. The build order itself for China is pretty much identical to what it used to be. The one big difference is you always go Imperial Academy first, unless you're getting like Omega cheese, then you need a Barbican straight away. 6 is 5, right? No, you can go 6. You get an extra 10 wood. Technically you can go 5 too, but you can go 6. Doesn't matter. So the build itself is the same, the way you're going to conduct it, except you go, if you want to, you know, min-max as much as possible and optimize your build, you do the wood thing. If you're maybe a low league or you're new to China, you don't need to do it. It's just a bit better. So now you go always with Imperial Academy first, and I build it with 1 villager. You used to go Barbican because the only thing that Imperial Academy gave you is extra taxes. That's it. It didn't give you anything else. So you were only gathering extra tax money from the buildings that it's influenced in. Now, Imperial Academy is a drop-off point. Actually, I don't know if that was in the last patch or the patch before. But either way, Imperial Academy is a drop-off point for your Imperial officials. And you can train Imperial officials in it, which is huge because before you had to build... So the first one you build on start, as you see right here, and again, you should watch the Season 1 guide first for China. But what ended up happening is you have to build another 3 imperial officials at some point, and that means that you don't build 3 villagers, right? Because you're prioritizing imperial officials out of your TC. But now you can build officials in Imperial Academy, which allows you to actually basically get 3 extra workers out of thin air. So China got a little buff in the early game that is actually very, very big. So you can see, this is the moment right here. You can see how I'm rallying to the wood. So now I'm going to rally to the wood until I get 50 wood. And then I'm going to build a lumber camp. But if you do the trick that I mentioned on start, you would build a lumber camp straight away right now. So something to consider. So what you're supposed to do now is when you have enough resources to age up, you go with Imperial Academy. I think here I go for the Barbican first because, like I said, there was no real point building Imperial Academy before. Let me just speed it up a little bit. Yeah, and I build the Barbican first because back in the day, you build Barbican first with 1 villager. By the time the enemy comes, you know, you have Barbican up, you don't gotta worry. So now you're a little bit more exposed, quote unquote, for a little bit, but you're still fine. So what you're gonna do, the difference, is you build an Imperial Academy and you're going to have 2 workers on wood only, so not 3, like you can see now. You would have 2 workers on wood and you're gonna rally workers on food until you have enough resources to build a Barbican. The reason why you want to have enough resources to build a Barbican is you want to activate the Song Dynasty that gives you faster villager production. Once you do that, you're going to leave 8 workers on food and you're going to put all the other workers on wood and you're going to slowly continue to build towards the 2nd TC plus with the Song Dynasty, and then on the build continues as normal. So again, the only difference is right now with the China build order is that you're going to build Imperial Academy first with 1 worker, 2 workers on wood, and you're going to be rallying workers onto the food until you can build a Barbican, and then you're going to leave 8 on food and send the rest to the wood and then go for your 2nd TC. Another thing to mention, the moment your Imperial Academy finishes and you start your Barbican, you should basically have enough resources for a Barbican when your Imperial Academy is about 80-90% done. So that's kind of like the timeline that you should be looking at. And then you're going to build a Barbican. I also, in this guide, I also explain where to build Barbicans and how, so check that out. You're going to build Barbican with 3 workers. And the reason why you build it with 3 is because you want to hit the Song Dynasty. And the reason you build Imperial Academy with 1 is because you don't gain anything by accessing Feudal Age with China. You're not making units instantly, right? So once you do that, once you put Academy, it finishes, you put Barbican, the next 100 food and 50 gold, whenever is available, assuming you're constantly producing villagers, you will make an Imperial official out of your Imperial Academy. And you will let that Imperial official gather some gold first, and you will make another one after. And what you want to do is once that 2nd Imperial official has collected some gold, you're going to put it to supervise on the wood, and then the 3rd Imperial official will supervise the stone, and the main Imperial official will still be on food. After that, you're going to slowly, like in this guide, you're going to get wood, you're going to get stone, and you're going to get 2nd TC whenever you have enough resources. And whenever you have 150 gold, after making the extra 2 Imperial officials for a total of 3, you're going to get wheelbarrow as well. And obviously you have the guy supervising it, so he's going to finish pretty quickly. After the wheelbarrow, after the Barbican, after you have 3 Imperial officials, just make an extra one so he goes around and picks up all the gold. There's also an upgrade in Imperial Academy that increases the tax collection from 40 to 80. Whenever you have extra gold, get that too, because it's pretty good. It allows you basically to get more gold gathered with 1 Imperial official. I know this maybe sound complicated, but once you try it, you really will see it's not. If you have any troubles with the build, you can either check out my live stream twitch.tv/Beastyqt when I play Chinese and see how I do it. Or you can go to AOE4 World. There's a tools that you can use there to watch VODs of specific matchups. So I made a video about it, but it's pretty easy to find. It's basically like a VOD finder for Twitch. But yeah, this is the adjustment for the build. And the reason why this adjustment was done, by the way, is only because you can build Imperial officials from the Academy, and it saves you a lot of economy early on in the game, and it made China quite a bit better. China is now a civ that is played on open maps just fine. Before, it was a civ that you would only play on closed maps or maps you can early wall. China is now played on open maps, and you can fight your opponent in feudal, you can fight your opponent in castle, because the economy is boosted and buffed quite a bit. Now let's talk about some other changes that China has received, just to keep you guys updated. I see a question in chat: when do you build a barracks? Whenever you need it. That is the simplest answer. If you're playing against French, if a knight might arrive at your stone and you think you can defend it, build a barracks. If your Barbican is covering your food and stone, you don't need to build a barracks, right? It's the same as like when to build walls. Whenever you think that you can quickly wall without spending too many resources. If you have to spend too many resources, might as well make a barracks and a couple of spearmen to defend against knights. But Barbican in most cases will secure you the resources you need. So another thing that has changed for China is Barbican is now has as much vision as a watchtower. So the vision radius of Barbican is much larger, and Barbican can be upgraded in let me skip here. Barbican can now be upgraded in Castle to have a Springald upgrade, and it can have a Bombard upgrade in Imperial. So Barbican basically just got a buff that whatever you put it, you can upgrade the new emplacements later on it as well. Another thing that China has received is a lot of the buildings that required you a dynasty can now be built an age earlier. So village is that big, let me see if I build it at some point. I probably do. Village is that big house that costs 125 wood and it gives you 40 supply. That can now be built in Dark Age. So you don't need any dynasty for it. You can just build it in Dark Age if you want to. Don't do it, but just letting you know. Granary as well used to cost 350 wood, which is basically the big mill that also increases the gathering rate of the farmers. Now it only costs 150 wood. So there's a lot of times where you're fighting with your opponent in feudal or maybe even castle, and before you were like, oh, I guess I'm dead, because if you transition to farms, they're not that great. But transitioning to farms super early on with Chinese is actually not that bad, because of the granaries now costing 150 wood, and I think it's 10 or 15% to all the villagers affected. It gives them increased gather rate, and that stacks. So if you build 3 granaries and farms around it, the villagers that are in the same circle of each granary will get like whatever. If it's 10%, it's gonna get 30% extra gathering rate, which is quite a lot. So that's another cool thing that China has received. And the last thing that has changed is the meta. There's basically 2 builds you can go with China that I would suggest, or 2 playstyles, I guess, not builds. One is the good old mass spearmen, mass palace guards, and you run by with palace guards and you kind of build siege behind it, like nest of bees and bombards later on, which is still viable and still fine. And the second playstyle is actually not going for siege at all, at least early on, and just massing horsemen and massing spearmen. And this build is especially good if you go for feudal or castle granaries and you get your food economy to insane amounts, and then you can just outproduce and just mass units and basically play like a Zerg in StarCraft 2 where you overwhelm your opponent. So that's kind of like the new style. And then late game, Fire Lancers got a buff as well in the last patch, whenever that was, like a month ago. Fire Lancers are a lot better, and they also have the Age 4 landmark, don't know what it's called, the one where you used to get cheaper units around it, now also gives attack speed, 20% attack speed, and 20 healing over, I think it's like 10 seconds when one of your dynasty unit dies. So if you're amassing fire lancers and one fire lancer dies, basically buffs all the other fire lancers. Spirit way, thank you. So yeah, mass fire lancers is a thing in the late game, actually, in one-on-ones. So try it out, it's a lot of fun. China is probably my second favorite civ, maybe even my favorite civ right now, because not only it's viable in feudal, but it has a lot of options, a lot of styles you can do. You can even do crossbows, you can do whatever you want with China. And that is pretty much it. I would say other than that, China has remained the same. Like I said, the biggest change was that Imperial Official thing, which complicates the build a little bit, but you come down to the same thing. It's just basically doing it in a different order. You don't go Barbican first, you go Imperial Academy first. So don't be too confused, alright? Now let's go through the matchups. China versus English. This is a matchup that used to be, in my opinion, favored for English quite a bit in the late game because they would have gold. But with this new style of China, where you just spam a crap ton of spearmen or palace guards or fire lancers, you actually almost never run out of gold, ever. So you're always going to have gold. So in a way, you don't have that disadvantage against English anymore. And fire lancers are very, very good at sniping siege. They're very good at sniping, landmarks, farms, whatever. So I think this is a more even playing field now. And what you want to do is avoid playing against English in Imperial in a line. Like you want to do run-bys. Or if you are fighting in a line, you want to make sure you're very siege heavy and you have hand cannoneers as well. Regarding in feudal, I mean, the Barbican is such a good defensive tool to have against Chinese. It makes it a lot harder for English to put any pressure on Chinese. But if the fighting comes down to feudal, you will be able to just have way better production because you can also supervise your production buildings and kind of overwhelm English completely. Especially if you go like Juginu or Chukinu, I don't know what they're pronounced. And horsemen, you can basically just mow down all the spears with the dynasty unit and then have horsemen clean up everything else. In castle, I would also say that both civs can win, don't get me wrong, but it's very hard for English to push into Chinese with mass units or lancers if you go spearmen, nest of bees, because English doesn't really want to go super early springald's. So I think overall this is a pretty good matchup for China. China versus Mongols. Mongols can tower rush you like they can every civ, but it's not that popular because you hit your feudal really fast because your buildings construct faster. So if you ever notice Mongol tower rushing you, build your first landmark, Imperial Academy, with 3 workers to age up faster, get an archer and just deny their tower rushing. Late game, you definitely have the advantage. This is probably the most one-sided matchup in the late game because you can just make fire lancers and kill all their workers because they don't have walls. So yeah, in castle, be aware of the Mongol just mass lancers, which you can figure out by defending it by getting some walls and getting some spearmen. And Mongols also love doing massive siege pushes, so that's something you should be careful of. If you see a lot of infantry, siege is probably coming, so start building springald's. But other than that, I think pretty good matchup for China. French versus China is all about how well you defend in the early game. You 100% have the advantage in the late game. I mean, China has insane siege, and against a lot of civs, you will have an advantage in the late game. The knight aggression is not as scary against Chinese as it is against some other civs because you get a Barbican, which is a massive, basically tower that can deal with knights or help you zone them out. But French can definitely all-in you, and it can definitely be hard to deal with, especially if they cut you off your food sources super early on. So that's something that you should be careful of. In castle, they can overwhelm you with just sheer amount of knights, especially if they get royal bloodlines. So my advice is just mass spearmen against French and get some nest of bees to kill their archers or crossbows, but just have enough knights to kill their have enough spearmen, sorry, to kill their knights, because knights with royal bloodlines are basically imperial knights. So if you don't have enough spearmen, you can quickly get overwhelmed, and they can also sniper siege with knights. So yeah, late game, you got it. Rus versus China. I think that technically Rus should win because of Streltsy, but if you choose to go for the Fire Lancer route, they don't have stone walls. I mean, technically they can with Spasskaya Tower, but no one goes there at landmark. So you can just literally, you know, burn through their walls with Fire Lancers and snipe their landmarks if you want to. So I would say it's a pretty good matchup for Chinese. Early on, Rus I think is actually more dangerous than French against Chinese, because they can get the super early boars and go that build that's like 4 or 5 archer ranges with some knights and do ramp pushes and try to end the game that way. It's one of the few civs that will be able to outmass you in feudal and can be very, very deadly. But other than that, Rus is a very all-around civ against Chinese. I think they can play at any point, so scouting them and knowing what they're doing is very, very important. If they do rush castle, try to deny relics with your spearmen. But other than that, it's kind of like a stable matchup, I would say. A balanced matchup in terms of strategy and who has advantage where. HRE versus Chinese. I mentioned a little bit ago from HRE point of view. From Chinese point of view, your goal is to deny or slow down relics as much as you can. So building walls around relics is not a bad idea to basically get HRE to not attack you with men-at-arms or knights, but to be destroying the walls and try to get relics, right? So if you don't block the relics, they're just gonna get relics and kill you, or go Imperial. But if you block the relics, you're gonna delay their economy by quite a long time. So that's something you should do while slowly taking up to castle yourself. And you should try to not let them get the Imperial, and you should try to make them stay in castle for as long as you can, so that they don't, you know, get the printer out and make billion workers. Because even if they get a couple of relics, you're still on 2 TC Song dynasties, so your economies are going to be similar in the way of you're going to have so many workers that your economy is going to be pretty good as well. China versus Delhi. This is a matchup where you can build Barbican on the watchtowers. Sorry, not watchtowers. On the sacred sides. I've been streaming 9 hours. I'm dead. You can build Barbican on the sacred side so that you can kind of prevent capturing one sacred side early on. You can fight Delhi in feudal and not let them get sacred sides at all. Or you can just boom and get to castle. And even if they have sacred sites and relics, you have something that they don't like, which is Nest of Bees. It basically counters the Delhi healing strategy quite well, because Nest of Bees does so much damage. So you can deal with Delhi either way. One thing to, I guess, note is to not let them have sacred sites for extended periods of time. But other than that, you should be able to, like I said, choose what you want to do. Either 2 TC into castle, or you can just go 2 TC Song and then fight them in feudal. Both work. China versus China. This is basically just out booming each other. Sometimes I see 3 TC China in this matchup, and both players just AFK, you know, macro for 20 minutes and then they start fighting. Comp you want to probably go for. Sometimes you can open with some horsemen or knights to harass, but palace guards are very popular here because they can just run around the enemy palace guards and just kill their siege. So you kind of don't need Springles. You just go Nest of Bees and you just run past their units and just kill their siege. So it's a weird matchup, and you kind of gotta get a feel for it. But usually, like I said, it's just a boom fest. Who's gonna have more villagers and who's gonna macro harder. And last but not least is Abbasid This is a pretty chill matchup. Abbasid is not really an aggressive civ, so you'll both end up booming. If Abbasid stays on 2 TC and you have 2 TC Song, you'll have an advantage. If Abbasid goes for 3 TC, that means that they're gonna not do any aggression, so you can just chill and kind of cruise all the way to castle and just kind of macro up. It's a pretty even matchup. They do have some timings with being able to produce siege on the field, but if you recognize it and start making spring nodes early, you will be absolutely fine. In the late game, obviously against Delhi and HRE, you are favored because it is China, and against Abbasid in the late game, you are favored as well. So overall, I think China is really a strong civ. The biggest downside of China is how hard it is to play, but if you know how to play it and if you play it well, it's one of the best civs for sure. And I hope you can see now why I didn't want to make a full-on, you know, new guides or build orders, because like I said, most of the stuff that I told you is playstyle and not so much a build order. And season 1 guides were build order guides. Like I said for the previous one, I could have, you know, showed you how to do one base China, but it's just not good. So it's one of those things, right? You might as well learn the proper build and practice that than learn the wrong build, maybe get some rating and then plummet because it doesn't work anymore. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these. I mentioned this already. I might make guides for every civ that are called Everything You Need to Know About English, Everything You Need to Know About French, where it's not a build order guide, but I go through all their bonuses, how to play the civ to like their full potential, mention a lot of stuff that you didn't know about, talk about their unique units and so on and so forth. But that is it from me. Thank you guys for watching on YouTube's and Twitch's, and have a great one. Bye-bye.